Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, from wherever you're joining to our second in the series of a webinar on building inclusive recycling supply chains in practice. This year, or this evening for us, we're featuring Indonesia today. A warm welcome. Before we get into the program and the agenda, I'd like to share a couple of housekeeping rules. Very briefly, you can post your questions in our Q&A chat box. And most important, the recording of the webinar will be shared with all the participants following the event. Thank you. For the agenda today, I'll start with a kickoff. Most importantly, we'll hear from a waste picker first in a little bit, after which I hand over to Mahija Parahita Nusantara, to Ibu Icha, who will, as a chairwoman, who will share with us the results of the baseline assessment and also the remediation, after which Kun will take us through a panel discussion with our partners and implementation partners on the ground. With that, I think we can go to a video from Pak Cipto, who is on the ground in Jakarta working in the waste sector.
Nama saya Cipto, kelahiran dari Jawa Tengah, Kecamatan Bantar Bolang, Kabupaten Pemalang. Sekarang saya tinggal tempat di daerah Tanah Tinggi, RT 12, RW 06. Terus setiap hari ini saya mencari barang pulungan buat nafkahin anak dan istri. Dan selanjutnya selebihnya buat tabungan biaya anak sekolah. Ya, kita mulai mulung dari tahun 2011 sampai sekarang. Ya, kondisi saya tetap begini, belum ada perubahan. Ya, alhamdulillah. Selagi kita masih sehat, selagi kita masih mampu berjalan, ya kita alhamdulillah bisa makan. Dan sekali lagi, setiap harinya kita ya kita berusaha untuk menafkahin anak dan istri. Kita waktu belum mulung, kita waktu ini ya kita waktu itu cari kuli bangunan dulu. Pas nggak ada bangunan kita ya ikut temen nyari mulung, dan alhamdulillah sampai sekarang kalau lagi ada proyek bangunan ikut proyek, kalau nggak ada ya kita mulung juga dan ikut temen-temennya juga nyari. Dan sebagian kalau lagi ada proyek misalkan jauh ya kadang-kadang saya ninggal anak istri ikutin temen proyek yang jauh, pulang seminggu sekali, jadi kita bisa pulang bisa ngasih nafkah anak dan istri. Ya, semua pekerjaan mulung semua saya suka, Bu, karena begini ya, biarpun kita kerjaan pemulung hina tapi kita ya yang penting kita halal aja lah gitu. Ya kita namanya banyak temen di jalan, kita kadang-kadang sambil nyari, kadang-kadang kalau pas kita lagi istirahat suka istirahat bareng ngobrol sambil minum kopi. Ya setelah itu ya kita sambil jalan lagi sambil nyari lagi sekalian pulang.
Thank you. So, with a mounting challenge of an expected plastics leakage of 30 metric tons by 2040, there is no possible way, if you go to the next slide, that we can solve this environmental challenge without the inclusion of over 40 million waste pickers globally. They account for more than 60% of plastics collected. But as we've seen and heard from Tito, the human rights impacts experienced by the informal waste sector workers are persistent marginalization. There's a lot of gender inequality, sometimes child labor, exclusion from social financial services due to excess of ID cards, for example, lack of decent working conditions, and so on. So if you can go to the next slide, please. That's the reason we set up the Responsible Sourcing Initiative. The Responsible Sourcing Initiative engages with all the stakeholders in the supply chain to advance responsible sourcing practices that respect human rights and strengthen circularity. The Responsible Sourcing Initiative is grounded in the UN Guiding Principles and the Fair Circularity Principles, and it addresses the how for companies to implement human rights due diligence and support continuous improvement by adopting the Harmonized Responsible Sourcing Framework for recycled plastics. This is a mouthful. If you go to the next slide, the Responsible Sourcing Framework is the anchor of our work. This framework has been a collaborative effort of over 40, I think by now 60 organizations globally, including the International Alliance of Waste Pickers, many national chapters of the International Alliance, but also buyers of recycled material. And we collectively agreed on what good looks like. What does responsible sourcing actually mean? And we came together and aligned on a set of minimum indicators and organized along 5 themes: economic empowerment, environment, health and safety, autonomy and inclusion, collective representation, and gender equality. If you go to the next slide. And implementing this harmonized framework is really aligning the standards, not only for plastics, but also for used beverage cartons and now for all recycled materials. Aluminium, for example, glass, textiles, any recycled material. Because at the end of the day, the informal part of the supply chains collect all the materials of a value. If you go to the next slide, please. We're currently implementing the harmonized framework in over 12 supply chains because the most important of everything is to be able to showcase that this harmonized framework can be implemented. So we've started implementation in Viet Nam and Indonesia about 2.5 years ago. And we'll hear in a bit from all our incredible partners what that actually looks like. We have 4 implementation projects in India, 1 in Kenya, we're launching 1 in Ethiopia, and later this year in Brazil and Colombia. If you go to the next slide, please. We now get to the most interesting part of this webinar. We're working together with an incredible set of partners. First and foremost, Mahija Parihita Nusantara. I'll hand over in a bit to Icha. Our recycling partner, who is courageous and who has already been on this journey for such an impressive time, actually, Amandina Bhumi Nusantara. Our solution providers, Sara Paduli, Rangkul Paduli, our implementation partner First Mile, and last but definitely not least, Coca-Cola and Coca-Cola Euro-Pacific partners that make this project possible. I would now love to hand over, after I just put a quote up actually, that we heard last week when we had all the solution partners in the room and many of the waste workers across the supply chain. And Ibu Pasaribu said, "I've devoted my life for my family and community, and the Responsible Sourcing Initiative Indonesia project allows me to do this." And with that, I hand over to Icha. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. Well, good evening, everyone, or maybe it's morning at your time. Thank you for joining us today. So my name is Ardina Zaiza, or you can call me Icha, and I'm leading Yayasan Mahija Parahita Nusantara, or the foundation, the implementing partner of Responsible Sourcing Initiative in Indonesia. So today I will walk you through what we see on the ground, what the RSI baseline has identified, and most importantly, how remediation actions can improve the lives and working condition of informal waste workers. Next slide. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so before we go further, let me briefly introduce Mahija Parahita Nusantara Foundation. I know the name is quite long, but you can just mention as Mahija. So Mahija works to ensure that post-consumer PET bottle sourcing is carried out responsibly. So by strengthening protection, safety, and fair practices for waste workers within the recycling supply chain. So right now, we are closely working with Amandina Bumi Nusantara, so the recycling facilities, who is also here, represented by Ibu Emeline. So our role is not to replace existing system, but to work within the recycling value chain to make sure social risks, especially those affecting informal waste workers, are addressed in a practical and sustainable way. So next slides. And again, before we talk about the recycling systems or remediation, it's important to understand the plastic challenge in Indonesia. I think Anna has mentioned briefly about that. But as you know, Indonesia generates a very large volume of plastic waste each year. And while recycling exists, only a portion of plastic waste is actually recovered and recycled. So a significant amount still ends up in landfills or leaks into the environment. So what's often overlooked is that in this system, we rely heavily on informal workers. So without informal waste workers, much of the recyclable plastic in Indonesia perhaps would very hard or would never be recovered at all. So when we talk about plastic waste, we're also talking about people, livelihoods, and also the working conditions. Next slide. Yeah. So recycling in Indonesia does not operate as one centralized or fully formal system. So instead, it works through a fragmented by highly active networks, starting from households, moving through informal collectors, waste banks, aggregators, and finally, the recyclers. So most of the value creation happens before the material reach recycling plants. So this means that sorting is mostly manual, recovery depends on human labor, and informal waste workers are central to the system. However, this work often happens without formal standards, protections, or recognition. So this is the reality in which the responsible sourcing initiatives operates. Next slides. So this is just to give you like an overview. So this is just a general recycling flow in Indonesia based on our field observations and also multiple sources. So what's important to emphasize here is that this is not an ideal system. This is not an idealized system, but this is how recycling actually works in practice. So because of this, the earliest stage are where risks are concentrated, working conditions matters most, and of course, the remediation can have the strongest impact. And that's why, next slides. Because the waste workers operate at the earliest stage, their working conditions then shape safety outcomes, income stability, and how materials are handled and sorted as well. So if workers lack of protective equipment, for example, stable income, access to basic services, it affects not only their well-being, but also the reliability and quality of the recycling downstream. So this is why RSI focuses on the waste workers, where small improvements perhaps can create ripple effects throughout the system. Next slides. Okay, so to understand these realities more clearly, this is basically when we conducting the RSI project, we understand that we cannot only work with the waste workers, right? This needs to be like a collective effort. So it requires engagement across the value chain, not only at the worker level. That's why we work from tier 1, so the recycling partners, Amandina Bumi Nusantara here, tier 2, the collection centers or the aggregator partners who compacted and built the PET plastic bottles, the collection partners or small and medium aggregators who conduct like collection and also sorting. And also at tier 4 is the waste pickers or small junk shop. So the informal waste workers that collects the materials. Okay, so RSI, basically a project in Indonesia. We started with baseline assessment first across selected location in Jabodetabek or Greater Jakarta area and Subang West Java. So involving informal waste workers and the related actors, as you can see from the slides before. So the baseline help us identify systemic risks, to understand where remediation is most needed and most effective. So as you can see, this baseline highlighted several recurring risk areas. So this includes inadequate income and lack of social security, absence of health and safety protocols, limited access to healthcare and government insurance, and also low awareness of legal rights and grievance mechanism, and weak collective organization and representation. So these risks are actually interconnected and often reinforce each other. So next slide. Yeah. So we know that the responsible sourcing initiative does not aim to fix everything at once. So instead, we focus on practical remediation actions that are achievable and also meaningful for workers. So as you can see here, based on the baseline assessment, we have what we call remediation action plans or the solutions that we are implementing. So these include supporting collective representation through community-based association, also facilitating access to national ID cards and government insurance programs, because the reality of the field is even the waste workers, a lot of them do not have ID cards, so they are not being recognized, not even as citizens in their own country where they live in. So this is very important because without ID cards, they cannot access any social security programs. And also the remediation includes providing basic health and safety training, and also strengthening literacy and numeracy skills and improving transparency and coordination across the supply chain. So these are you might see this as like a simple steps, but for workers, they are very transformative. Next slide. Okay, so this is where we implement the RSI project. So we are currently implementing the project in Greater Jakarta area and Subang West Java, working closely with the existing waste workers communities and also local partners. So implementation is of course localized because conditions is different from one area to another, and of course solutions must reflect local realities. So in 2026, of course, our aim is to roll out to more collection centers or areas across Java region. Next slide. So this is the early implementation outcomes. Even at an early stage, we're already seeing tangible outcomes. So as you can see here, the numbers, thousands of workers have participated in health and safety training. Hundreds have obtained national ID cards or access government insurance for the first time. Community associations, or what we call as paguyuban in local language, have been formed and strengthened. So these are not just like an abstract indicators. These are the changes that affects their daily life. Okay, next slide. All right, so this slide just shows what implementation looks like on the ground. You can see how we do the community groups or the paguyuban, making sure that they understand the importance of having collective representations, like showing them the steps on how to do it, how to form a group, and how you can, use the groups for their own goods. And also, you can see like the ID cards, how we help facilitate that. So basically, it's not about like large infrastructure. It's about facilitation, trust building, and also consistent engagement. Next slides. So, okay, so this is Ibu Yuyun. She is a 66-year-old waste worker from Bintara, Bekasi in West Java. So through RSI, she became involved in Paguyuban, or local community groups, and gradually gained the confidence to support fellow workers in accessing identity documents and also social protections. So her story really reflects what RSI aims to do, right? So to enable workers to strengthen their own communities, just step by step. She even mentioned to us that for the first time, she can use a pen. So something very simple, but very transformative once again. Okay, next slides. So, of course, RSI also engage with government institutions. Right now, we are currently sharing the ground level realities. So we work with national and local agencies as well, and make sure that this engagement helps the existing systems to be better and can recognize and support informal waste workers. Okay, I think that's, next slide. Okay. This is the last slide. So to conclude, basically improving recycling outcomes cannot be separated from improving waste workers' conditions, right? So this RSI shows that simple, practical remediation actions, when done collaboratively, can significantly improve safety, dignity, and also recognition for informal waste workers. But this work cannot be done alone. It will require then moving forward government support for effective implementation, especially policy implementation, brand commitment to embed this responsible sourcing into the value chain, and also broader social recognition and people behind recycling. So thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Icha, for all the wonderful work that you're doing with the team on the ground every single day. I've heard firsthand last week how impactful that is, how truly lives are impacted. I would love to hand over to Kunapong Kunaraksa, who leads our efforts in Indonesia. And Kun, I'll leave it to you to introduce our panelists.
Thank you so much, Anna, and good evening, everyone. It's quite late here in Australia, but I'm so happy to be here. We have a very special panel today, which in fact, I'm actually excited myself. So I hope you are excited the same with me. So for the panel, we have 4 people. So first is Anna Dia, Community Stakeholder Director for ASEAN and South Pacific from the Coca-Cola Company. Second, we have Emmeline Hambali, Director of Amandina Bumi Nusantara. And then third, we have Pak Andang Mintaja, Head of Swara Peduli Indonesia Jakarta Foundation. And we have Ruth Christian from Mahija Parahita Nusantara Foundation, who will translate for Pak Andang. And lastly, we have Isha, who you just heard just then. So I just want to explain a little bit of how it's going to work for the panel. So I will ask questions to a few questions to each of the panelists. And so if you have any, and then we'll open up for them to answer questions you might have. So while you're listening to each of the panel, please you can type in your questions into the chat box or the Q&A, and then I'll take that question and ask to the panelist. If there are more questions, they will be answered at the end as time permitting. So and lastly, and I'll introduce the first speaker again. And lastly is that the way the panel will work, I want to paint you a picture, right? From what it means from the brand globally, go to the recycler, go down to the community and hear from Isha again, some more insights, what's happening on the ground, how it's happening, and how it's going to scale forward into the future. Without waiting further, I would love to ask Anna Dia first a few questions. So Anna, the first question I would like to ask you is, what are some of the aspects of the Responsible Sourcing Initiative project in Indonesia that align with the Coca-Cola company's global sustainability and social impact strategy? Would love to hear a little bit about that.
Thank you, Kun, and good evening, everyone. I'm coming from Sydney, Australia, as well, alongside Kun. So it is quite late here, but it's lovely to be here tonight. And I wanted to just say thank you for including me on this panel. I've been a very big champion of this program for many years, and so it is amazing to see such great progress. But I guess coming back to the question around the strategy. I guess as a company, we really do recognise our responsibility to help solve, the big complex plastic waste challenges facing, not only our planet, but our society as well. And, really unlocking solutions for responsible sourcing is absolutely critical to that. So our packaging sustainability efforts focus on both increasing recycled content as well as improving collection rates. But also through our work with our Global Foundation and Global Human Rights team, improving livelihoods for informal workers and respecting the human rights of vulnerable workers in our value chain is a huge focus of that strategy. So for me, I really see this RSI project in Indonesia, where we're the brand partner. It really helps us to bring so many layers of that sustainability and social impact strategy together. But look, it's not only strategy. When I think about that project, it's actually also brought, functions across our business together as well, which I think has been, a really unique part of this project for us as a Coke system, as we call it, with our bottling partners as well. So, we sort of first started this partnership here in Southeast Asia. And then, we brought colleagues in from INSWA and Africa, Global Human Rights team, as well as the Coca-Cola Foundation. So, this sort of we're all coming at it from slightly different angles. But what that has done is kind of brought these different parts of the strategic puzzle together, which is all working on helping, strengthen recycling value chains and helping us meet those strategic goals. So I guess more specifically, to Indonesia, we're working with lots of different partners, Medina and Mahija working with our bottling partners, investing in recycling infrastructure, helping to subsidise local recyclers to help increase, local bottle collection rates, certifying food grade recyclers as our suppliers, using our brands to support consumer behaviour and collection via integrated marketing campaigns, as well as then partnering with, lots of like-minded organisations like, Circulate Initiative, to really help lift capacity for informal waste workers and work towards that more dignified and fairly compensated work. So we really love this project. And, I think this partnership with RSI is about really ensuring that we have a good systems level understanding, and how we can really be part of the solution as well.
Amazing, Anna. What jumped out from what you just shared is collaboration. That's why we're here, right? We are collaborating with everyone across the value chain. And I love that you say you touch on the good system level thinking as well. My second question to you is, what are some of your observations on utilizing the harmonized responsible sourcing framework in helping to meet external pressures facing business right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I have so many observations of this project and, watching teams grow. But, one of my biggest observations is that this is one of the projects where we've seen really, tangible, significant progress. And obviously that's, largely thanks to the, the TCI team and the capability building. But I think, more specifically what I've seen this project do in helping, us internally is giving our teams, a much stronger understanding of, the recycled plastic supply chain, understanding risk, how to mitigate it, and, really enable more informed decisions in this space, helping us understand that more. It's given us, an opportunity to continue demonstrating leadership, as a brand in this space by being a founding partner, and really helping to sort of bring other brands along the journey with us. And, as Kun mentioned before, collaboration is absolutely key. And I think my favourite saying is a rising tide lifts all boats. And, we have to continue believing that and holding hands together in spaces like these. I think one of the other observations, from my end, is really around storytelling. I would say don't underestimate the power of storytelling, particularly to educate internally for us, and to shine a light on these programs and the importance of continuing to fund this work and maintaining momentum in this space. So many, other observations, but, obviously launching the Responsible Sourcing Network and, many stakeholders are now on this journey. And, this is, I think, how we need to continue, as a collective, that, we can't, solve these issues alone, and we need to be singing from the same song sheet. So, all of that is great, but I think, mostly, and, we heard from Itcha earlier, but, in chatting to the teams on the ground and obviously hearing about, the workshops last week, I think what's really, interesting and exciting is how informal waste workers are starting to share their own stories. They've got, amazing outcomes in terms of basic literacy and numeracy skills starting to come in. Collection partners are really, starting to see the impact as well. And so I think, what our teams are learning is the most important aspect is having people on the ground, making sure that, they're progressing and learning via the implementation progress. And that all of the assets and the tools that are being provided via the remediation strategies, that they're being used properly, and that, all of these strategies are benefiting the entire value chain. So, I think, there are so many lessons and learnings for our teams and, helping to kind of, I think, the education, the knowledge, the understanding that we have, internally and as a business and as a team is what, this project has really done. So it's very, very exciting, and, and I just can't wait to sort of see the next iteration and continue iterating and scaling this work because it's so important.
Amazing, Anna. Every time I talk to you, I always learn something new from you. Specifically, two things that I picked from what you just said, right? Number one, storytelling, right? That's really key internally, but even more importantly, when I was in Jakarta last week, I got to hear firsthand stories from waste pickers, right? Ibu, Pasaribu, and Yuyan that you saw earlier. The stories were just so powerful, and there's nothing else that can beat that, right? So that's number one. Number two, about leadership, specifically locally, right? Because, they know best, they know what works on the ground, and it's important for people on the ground to lead the work and really share that insights to help us better understanding the value chain. So thanks again, Anna. We have some of the questions that are from the the audience and would like to ask to you as well. The question here is, for companies that are looking at doing similar work in Indonesia, what are the opportunities to collaborate with partners here?
I think, as we've talked about, and I will probably lean on the local team a little bit more, Itcha and, Emmeline as well, just from a local Indonesia perspective. But, I would say, as I said before, a rising tide lifts all boats. And in this space, I think the more hands that we have on deck, the more people that are being part of these projects, the better. So, I think from a company perspective, obviously funding is always, what's needed for these projects, and we're not in an easy environment at the moment. It's a tough environment. So, companies that have an opportunity or an interest in this space, that have an ability to fund certain parts of these projects, there will always be opportunities. I think, particularly, in Indonesia, and obviously scaling, this work. And I guess, as companies and that do have, funding and resource to do that, the responsibility, lies with us to find those opportunities. And, I think I remember at last year's forum, there was, very strong talk of privilege, and, the responsibility lies with those that have the privilege to work on systems change that for those that don't. And so, I'd say that's the bottom line of everything that we're working on. And those conversations around collaboration and collective action at scale are always welcome. So, yeah.
Sure. Thanks for that. Maybe another question I want to kind of understand a little bit further. You mentioned already about bringing different teams within the company to work on this project, right? But we'd love to understand a little bit why Indonesia market particularly. If you can share a little bit the motivation behind how you select this market particularly.
Yeah, I think, obviously through the work with Mahija and Amadina through our bottling partner, Coke Euro Pacific partners, they had already started a really, they'd already been on this journey, for quite a long time working in this space through the great work of Icha and the team. And I think it was a really natural choice for us to choose Indonesia to be the brand partner because of the existing work that already lay the foundation. And the opportunities then. So when I talk about the different teams within our business working on this, this project allowed us to also bring our bottling partners in through Mahija and Amandina and the CCEP team. And I think, again, when we talk about leadership and internal support, that really strengthened our ability to, push this through internally because of that, system support. So, I think Indonesia was a very obvious choice for us. And, and I think in the work that obviously Itcha shared and you hear more about today, the proof is in, the outcomes that we're already starting to see. So it was a natural choice.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all the insights you share. If I have to summarize what we heard from you in maybe 2 words that I pick, number 1 is system level thinking, right? And number 2 is, and this may be a personal bias, impact stories or stories from, different stakeholders within the value chain. So thank you again, Anna, for sharing that insights. So what I wanted to do is move from the brand partner that we have for the project now to the recycler partner, which is Amandina Bumi Nusantara. So Emmeline, firstly, thanks for being here again. And my first question here that I want to ask you is, from a recycler perspective, what challenges do you face when meeting requirements to source responsibly? And what steps are you currently taking to address them?
Good evening. Well, good evening for everybody on this side of the world. And I don't know if there's anybody on the other side. Good morning for the rest of you, I guess. Thank you so much for having me. So challenges. The first thing that I want to kind of talk about is alignment. And when I talk about alignment, it's sort of multidimensional alignment between the different brands, alignment within the supply chain. And I'll take on the alignment or the requirements that different brands would have for recyclers like us. It's different for every single one. Working with many stakeholders, we realize that there's no one set rule of what is quote unquote good. And that is a challenge because it's a growing, what started off as already a significant gap between reality and expectation. It's a continuing growing set of requirements that we have to fulfill in order for us to be able to source responsibly. So that's values in the different requirements that we need to fulfill. It's great to be working with the Circular Initiative because it actually sets a baseline for us on what is good. And that for us before all of this happened, it was a struggle to kind of decide what to do first. And we're very fortunate to be a part of this project because it does set that timeline and what needs to go first and what is our priorities, and setting that standardization is so important for us, because if you can imagine, otherwise we're running around trying to adhere to everybody's different requirements. The other one is the alignment within the supply chain. And as you can imagine, trying to work with different kinds of, and Icha has mentioned the landscape in which we work here in Indonesia, where we work with informal sectors all the way up to very formal sectors, multinational organizations. There is that, there's a huge difference in what is deemed as needed and necessary. A lot of times we face the question from our supply chain, why do we need to do it? Or why do we need to do more when right now what we're doing is enough and we are fulfilling our, at least in their eyes, the financial responsibilities that they have. What they don't kind of sort of see the bigger picture initially, right? And so for us to kind of bridge that gap in communicating and aligning the goals is a challenge. And once that goal is actually aligned, even at the start, there are other external factors that usually affects consistency and continuity, because without proper incentives for everyone to make it, I'll use exercise as an example. I just had a health checkup, and I have a high cholesterol, and all of a sudden I'm on a diet. Just to let you know, in the last 3 weeks, my cholesterol has dropped to normal levels. That incentive has actually disappeared for me to actually continue exercising. The way I see it, in consistently delivering responsibly sourced material, there is that factor of, when the incentive disappears, do I need to continue doing it? So in terms of values, what was not a value, to make it a value, it's a very long journey that requires a lot of work and a lot of constant reminding throughout the supply chain. The second one that I would probably say is a struggle for us is cost. In getting all these initiatives started and implemented, there was that huge gap in cost, because training, going out there, and Indonesia is an island country. So if we want to source responsibility from all the islands in Indonesia, logistically as well, that the startup cost is quite significant, because the exploration, the constant going and training and all of that, there is that startup investment costs. And then there's an investment in compliance, which is, again, something that is probably less than the startup cost. However, the compliance cost is also something that we're constantly faced with. And lastly, in facing a very fluctuative market, it is a cost. It doesn't look like a cost because it looks like we're passing it on to the resin cost, but the reality is that a fluctuating market creates again that if we are not making enough money, do we need to comply? Question. And again, back to my point on values, it's really hard to keep on doing something when there's economical challenges in the market. So what have we done? Obviously, we've been working with Mahija. I think we've been collaborating since 2022 with Mahija, and that has greatly helped get us through and bridge that gap between us and the rest of the supply chain. We're also taking on additional initiatives to kind of continue to educate ourselves, trying as much as possible to be closer to the ground so that we understand the realities on the ground, and just to kind of, make sure that we're not out of date when it comes to the information. There's a lot of things that come from dealing with the collection system that will actually really kind of help us plan through the next steps to make sure that we're doing the right things.
Thank you, Emmeline. That was really insightful. And as I said before, it's very late here, but when you talk about exercise, just make me really want to, hear what you have to say more, right? I think it's important for us as a sector to use some easy example like that, the exercise that you gave to really help it a complex topic very easily to be, digestible and understandable. So thanks for that. A few things that I pick up from you, insights. Number one is alignment. Alignment is really key when we, implement the project on the ground. We actually spend a lot of time explaining and engaging more than the actual implementation, just to make sure everyone is on the same page. So totally, I'm going to say the same word, totally aligned with what you just said, right? That's number one. Number two, about the cost, right? It's a challenging and interesting topic, and thanks for sharing the insight on that. What I wanted to do is just move to the next panelist that we have. And as I mentioned earlier, we have Pak Andang here, and we have Ruth here to translate Pak Andang's answers. So Pak Andang,
Yep.
glad to have you here today.
Yes, I'm glad to see you again.
So my first question for you is, in your experience working with waste pickers community, what are some of the common challenges that informal waste sector workers face in Indonesia?
Thanks, Kun. Terima kasih, Kun, dan selamat malam semuanya. Salam berbahagia untuk semuanya. Berkaitan dengan masalah tantangan yang ada di pemulung Indonesia, pekerja di sektor pengelolaan sampah, baik itu pemulung, pekerja lapak, dan pengumpul, merupakan pahlawan lingkungan yang memang seringkali tidak terlihat ya, hidden seperti itu. Meski peran mereka krusial dalam rantai pasok daur ulang di Indonesia. Mereka menghadapi banyak tantangan yang berlapis, mulai dari stigma sosial hingga risiko kesehatan yang nyata. Berikut mungkin tantangan utama yang paling sering mereka hadapi adalah, pertama adalah masalah kesehatan dan keselamatan kerja. Pekerja sektor ini sangat berisiko terpapar risiko fisik setiap hari tanpa perlindungan yang memadai, termasuk paparan zat berbahaya, kontak langsung dengan limbah B3. B3 itu bahan berbahaya dan beracun, sampah medis atau benda tajam tanpa alat pelindung diri yang memang berstandar seperti itu. Poin selanjutnya mungkin dari sisi masalah kesehatan adalah penyakit kronis. Jadi risiko tinggi karena terinfeksi saluran pernapasan, terus juga penyakit kulit, diare, hingga masalah ergonomi, gangguan otot tulang akibat beban kerja yang berat karena mereka setiap hari mobile ya, dari satu tempat ke tempat lain dengan membawa gerobak ataupun memakai karung yang memang itu berisikan barang-barang bekas hasil mereka mencari barang bekas itu seperti itu. Terus di lingkungan kerja berbahaya. Nah, di sini risiko tertimbul longsoran sampah itu di tempat pembuangan akhir atau kecelakaan lalu lintas bagi pemulung jalanan. Dan tahun lalu ada 2 kasus yang menimpa binaan kita. 2 kasus binaan kita tertabrak saat mereka tertabrak kendaraan saat mereka memulung jalan, dan yang satu kritis, yang satu meninggal dunia seperti itu gitu. Nah, yang kedua adalah ketidakpastian ekonomi dan kerentanan pendapatan. Nah, pendapatan mereka sangat bergantung pada fluktuasi harga pasar barang bekas tentunya. Di sini harga jual yang tidak stabil, harga plastik, kertas, atau logam bisa turun drastis kapanpun, tergantung permintaan pabrik atau harga minyak mentah global. Rantai tata niaga yang panjang, banyaknya perantara atau pengukur berlapis yang memang membuat harga yang diterima pekerja di tingkat bawah menjadi sangat kecil. Terus juga ketiadaan jaringan pengaman, mayoritas tidak memiliki akses ke BPJS Kesehatan, apalagi ke BPJS Ketenagakerjaan atau skema pensiun, sehingga jika mereka sakit, pendapatan langsung terhenti total seperti itu gitu. Nah, yang ketiga adalah stigma sosial dan eksklusi. Di sini ada hambatan psikologis dan sosial yang membuat posisi mereka semakin terpinggirkan. Pertama adalah stereotip negatif ya, sering dianggap kotor, dekil, dianggap sebagai pelaku kriminalitas, tuduhan pencurian, atau dianggap sebagai gangguan pemandangan kota, sampah kota, seperti itu. Minimnya pengakuan, meskipun mereka menyumbang signifikan pada circular economy, mereka jarang dilibatkan dalam perumusan kebijakan pengelolaan sampah daerah. Yang selanjutnya adalah akses terhadap pelayanan dasar. Karena status pekerjaan yang informal dan seringkali berpindah-pindah, mereka kesulitan mendapatkan hak-hak dasar mereka, seperti masalah administrasi. Banyak sekali teman-teman dari waste picker ini yang tidak memiliki KTP sesuai domisili kerja, sehingga sulit mengakses bantuan sosial atau layanan kesehatan gratis ataupun bantuan sosial yang diselenggarakan oleh pemerintah. Terus yang akses terhadap layanan dasar lainnya adalah edukasi anak. Anak-anak pekerja sampah berisiko tinggi putus sekolah karena tekanan ekonomi atau harus membantu orang tua untuk bekerja. Mungkin itu Kun, jawaban dari saya.
Okay, thank you, Pandang. I will translate
Ya,
that. From Pandang, informal waste sector workers are often called invisible environmental heroes. So the major issue first is health and safety, because many of them work in risky condition without proper protection. So they are exposed to hazardous medical waste, sharp objects, and then some also face serious risks like waste landslide at landfill. Pandang especially mentioned in his community itself. Last year, there's 2 accidents that the workers are overheat during collecting goods by vehicles. So that's the major issue. The second one is about the income instability, because their earning depends heavily on fluctuating recycling prices. So when market demand drops, their income drops immediately. And then on top of that, Pandang mentioned about long supply chains and multiple middlemen, meaning that the workers at the lowest level receive very little. And most of them also do not have any form of social protections, either it's health or work insurance. So when they get sick or injured, their income stops completely. Another challenge that Pandang mentioned is about social stigma, because they're often seen as like dirty or associated with certain crime, and their contribution to the circular economy is rarely recognized. Because of this, they're almost never included on the discussions. And lastly, it's about limited access to basic services, similar like previously mentioned about social protection. It's including ID, even for the kids. Their children in particular face a higher risk of dropping out of school, and also any educational support. So that's from Pak Endang Kun.
Thank you, Ruth. What jumped out the most is invisible heroes, right? That's what we saw together last week, and I'm excited to see more when I go back to Indonesia. So the second question that I have for Pak Andang is, what is the contributing role of informal waste workers in solving the plastic crisis? For example, how could they contribute to waste management policy and uptake of recycled materials?
Pekerja sektor informal bukan sekedar pencari barang bekas, mereka merupakan tulang punggung sistem daur ulang yang ada di Indonesia. Tanpa mereka, sebagian besar sampah plastik kita akan langsung berakhir di laut atau membukit di TPA tanpa terolah. Dan data dari yang KLH 2024 ada sekitar 8 ton sampah yang memang terkelola setiap bulannya oleh pemulung kita di Indonesia ini. Nah, berikut adalah peran strategis yang bisa mereka mainkan untuk mengatasi krisis plastik. Pertama adalah ujung tombak pemilahan atau collecting dan sorting. Saat ini sistem persampahan formal seringkali masih mencampur semua jenis sampah. Pekerja informal melakukan tugas yang tidak dilakukan mesin atau petugas kebersihan pada umumnya. Yang pertama adalah pemisahan spesifik. Mereka memilah plastik berdasarkan polimernya, misalkan PET, HDPE, LDPE, yang sangat krusial karena pabrik daur ulang membutuhkan kemurnian material yang tinggi. Terus juga adalah penyelamatan material. Mereka mengambil plastik yang sudah terbuang ke lingkungan seperti sungai, selokan, pinggir jalan, dan mengembalikannya ke rantai nilai yang berekonomi seperti itu. Yang kedua adalah penjamin pasokan industri daur ulang. Industri daur ulang yang membutuhkan suplai bahan baku yang stabil untuk beroperasi, misalkan efisiensi biaya. Nah, sektor informal menyediakan bahan baku dengan harga kompetitif dibandingkan plastik murni atau virgin plastik. Skalabilitas, dengan jaringan yang luas dan tersebar, mereka mampu mengumpulkan volume sampah dalam jumlah yang besar, yang sulit dijangkau oleh infrastruktur pemerintah yang terbatas. Yang ketiga adalah kontributor data dalam kebijakan pengelolaan sampah. Tentunya pekerja informal adalah ahli lapangan yang memang tahu persis jenis plastik apa yang paling hanya banyak beredar, di mana yang sulit didaur ulang, seperti adalah audit sampah. Mereka bisa dilibatkan dalam pengulangan data untuk kebijakan Extend Producer Responsibility atau EPR, di mana perusahaan bertanggung jawab atas kemasan yang mereka produksi. Itu juga validasi kebijakan. Masukan dari mereka dapat membantu pemerintah menentukan jenis plastik sekali pakai mana yang harus dilarang berdasarkan tingkat kesulitan daur ulangnya di lapangan seperti itu. Nah, bagaimana meningkatkan peran mereka? Untuk memastikan kontribusi tersebut diperlukan integrasi sistematis, bukan sekedar membiarkan mereka bekerja sendiri. Pertama adalah integrasi ke sistem formal atau inklusi, mengubah status mereka dari liar menjadi mitra resmi pemerintah atau swasta, contohnya melibatkan pengepul sebagai pengelola bank sampah atau pusat edukasi warga. Yang kedua adalah peningkatan standar material, yaitu memberikan pelatihan cara membersihkan dan memproses awal plastik seperti mencacah plastik, setoran dalam bentuk flex, agar nilai jual dan kualitas daur ulangnya meningkat. Yang ketiga adalah kemitraan dengan brand atau IPR. Perusahaan besar dapat bekerja sama dengan jaringan pelapak untuk menarik kembali kemasan produk mereka dari konsumen. Nah, tantangan integrasi meskipun perannya besar, ada hambatan dalam kebijakan. Pertama adalah standar kelayakan. Pabrik besar sering menuntut sertifikasi yang sulit dipenuhi oleh lapak kecil. Yang kedua adalah legalitas lahan. Banyak lapak berada di lahan ilegal, sehingga sulit bagi mereka untuk mendapatkan izin usaha resmi. Intinya Kun, mengatasi krisis plastik tanpa melibatkan sektor informal sama saja dengan mencoba menjalankan mobil tanpa roda. Mereka adalah sistem ekstraksi yang sudah ada dan bekerja selama puluhan tahun. Mungkin itu. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you, Pandang.
Sama-sama.
So from Pandang, informal waste sector workers are more than secondhand goods collectors. They are the backbone of the recycling system because the data from the Ministry of Environment indicates that at least 8 tons of waste are managed each month. So informal waste workers are the ones who actually make recycling happen. They collect and sort plastic every day, long before it reach any formal system. So they know which plastics still have value, which one don't move in the market, and why certain materials never get recycled. So this is also related, like from a policy perspective, they are also a key source of real data. They can tell us what type of plastic are most common, what's feasible to recycle and what's not. So from Pak Endang, this is important and extremely important for EPR policy and how decision making happened. And when it comes to uptake of recycled materials, they already support the market. They have network supply a recycling industry with large volume, with affordable prices and reducing reliance on virgin plastic. So for Pandang, the solution is not about replacing the informal sectors. What Pandang tried to say is replace without waste worker. It's just using a car without a wheel. So yes, without a wheel. So it's about how we can integrate them, recognizing them as a partner, bringing them into the waste management system, policy discussions, and brand-led recycling initiative. So they are already part of the solution. So we just need to integrate them more. So yeah, that's the key takeaway from Pandang.
Thank you, Pandang and Ruth.
Sama-sama.
Of course, I got something picked from what he said, right? Like it's like a car without a wheel. I mean, that's very, very easy to understand how important waste workers are. And what I took away is they are the backbone of the recycling system, right? But instead, they are not included in those discussions, right? So I think that's what we have been seeing so far. And thanks for sharing that, Pak Endang. Last but not least, Isha, I'm coming back to you. So we heard from the brand, recycler, and from the community. So Isha, with the baseline assessment or risk due diligence completed in Indonesia, what indicators or metrics from the Harmonized framework have been most relevant to establish and improve labor rights and responsible sourcing practices?
Okay, thank you, Kun. So, which indicators or metrics from Harmonized framework? So I would say economic empowerment emerged as a critical indicator, particularly because a large proportion of the waste sector is, again, operate in informal arrangements and lack of legal identification. So this directly limits their access to social protection, as I mentioned before. And also, I think so, economic empowerment in terms of accessing, obtaining ID cards or registering for public services, and also health and safety indicators were also consistently relevant from a practice on the ground. And also, finally, like indicate representations that is highlighted the absence of organized structure within the community. So I would say economic empowerment in terms of ID card access, health and safety trainings, indicators, and also related to collective representation.
Amazing. We see 3 themes here, right? The economic empowerment, health and safety, and then the...
Yeah.
Yes, just a lag from your side. and then collective representation. So my next question for you, as Mahija has been leading the remediation work with local partners on the ground, right? Could you share one or two highlights from these, sub-projects and how the solutions are helping to closing system gaps in the supply chain?
I would say the key highlight is supporting the access to identity documents, particularly that ID card, because this is not like a simple administrative task, but like a multi-step process involving like several institutions up to in the local level. The administrative requirements, travel costs, time away from work, like an inconsistent implementation at the local level, it really creates like significant barriers for the waste workers to obtain their ID card. So I'd say that that is one of the like the solutions that is very impactful, and also side targeting the health and safety training. So that's why what I mentioned in my presentation, I think those three really works to help like close the systemic gaps in the supply chain so far.
For just to wrap up the questions that we get through, the last question I have here, maybe I'll ask it back to Pak Andang because the internet on your end, it's a little bit choppy. Pak Andang, so the question I have here is very simple, but I think your insights will be really helpful to the audience. When implementing to empower waste workers, what is the most challenging thing that you face, and are they any rejection from them? If so, how did you handle that, or how can we handle that?
Pandang untuk kegiatan yang ada di lapangan, apa sih yang menjadi tantangan terbesarnya? Terus gimana merespon dari pengalaman tersebut?
Tantangan terbesar mungkin ketika kita berada di lapangan adalah berbenturan dengan stakeholder lokal ya, terutama ketika kita menghadapi tokoh lokal yang memang itu belum paham tentang program kita tuh. Dan kita jelaskan ke mereka by proses bahwa kita datang ke komunitas adalah tidak ada kepentingan apapun, baik itu agama, ras dan sebagainya, hanya untuk kepentingan kemanusiaan, menolong mereka untuk mendapatkan hak-hak mereka dari dari tidak punya BPJS, namun kita proses sampai akhirnya mereka punya BPJS kesehatan gratis seperti itu, terus dan tadinya mereka tidak punya ID card menjadi punya ID card dan mereka bisa memperoleh hak dasar untuk mendapatkan layanan bantuan dari pemerintah seperti itu.
Okay. So the biggest main challenge is regarding whenever like Pandang try to go to the community, so like local community that might not really understand about the project or like gaining the trust, it's like takes time everywhere, but especially in the waste picker community, Pandang face challenge to build that from the beginning. And then like the engagement often begins with explaining like this is about the humanitarian purpose of the initiative. So there's no hidden agenda, there's no specific interest. It's about helping the waste picker community, supporting them with the basic need. So like from many participants that like instant identity document or health insurance, they can get that. So the challenge is more like building the trust, especially for the local community.
Thank you both. Just to wrap up this panel discussion, there are words from each one of you that I picked up, right? And I want to summarize that back to you. The first one is collaboration. Second one is alignment. Third one is backbone. And then lastly, I think I'm going to steal it from Pak Andang, trust. I think those are the key words that we really, really need for the sector, and we saw it on the ground. And thanks again, my fellow panelists, for staying up this late with me and share the insights with everyone on this webinar. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much, Kun, and to all our panelists today. I wish everyone a great day ahead. Our next webinar will be on India and the learnings from different projects there. I hope to see you there. Thank you all. Selamat malam to everyone on this side of the world. Thank you.